Good evening. Welcome to Instructional Design from the Ground Up with Ashley Bunn, Denise Cardona, and the entire world out there on YouTube. We're going to do some great things tonight, have some great conversations. We invite you to join us on the chat line, ask us questions, tell us to dress better, whatever it is that you would like to add to this discussion, please do that. And remember, we're live the first and third Tuesdays of every month. Plus, we're adding additional content like the chapter chats and other things as they come up. So, glad you're here. We're going to have a great discussion tonight. And Denise and I aren't going to say anything after this. It's all Ashley. So we're just going to sit here and
Be
listen to
sponges.
look at Ashley.
We're going to
It's
be
like,
sponges.
It's a
yeah,
setup.
right, Chuck. No, actually, it isn't. We're going to talk about how to set up programs, how to do great things that way. And this was Ashley's idea, and I think it's a perfect topic. And why don't you give us a background on this? Because I know you've done a bunch of this stuff, and I mean you've been in ISD since birth because of your mom. So, this is all second nature to you. The rest of us are still catching up and learning. But program stuff. I mean, it's really what it's all about, isn't it?
It really is. And I think that there are just so many nuanced elements to standing up a program that if you don't have the inherent experience, right, of being an ISD by birth, there,
You're the only one I know, by the way.
To the
But
7
there,
billion people on the planet we're speaking to right now.
right, there are just certain things that you may overlook. And so I'm really excited and grateful that we're having the chance to talk about this because, like you said, Chuck, through my experience, I've been able to pick up so many different elements of a training program that are required and really valuable and enhance not only the learner's experience, but also how you as an instructional designer are able to validate the value long term of your program if you keep all of these or some of these things in mind. You can take some of them and leave them, but
well, I mean, it goes back to having a systems approach, right? It's the spine and nerve center of what we do as designers is we make everything talk to everything else and make everything fit with everything else. And program design, program management, direction, everything else is all part of this entire world of things that we look at as systems.
Mhm. Exactly. And so understanding, the basic structure or the elements that make up a system or a program will really help you think about how not only are you framing your content, but how you're connecting with your learners and how you're really engaging people or what kinds of ways you should be communicating with your stakeholders. It goes so deep if you're really really thinking about this strategically and intentionally.
Well, and that seems to be an oddity with some folks that manage programs. Um, they think all they have to do is put a product out there. They don't think about creating community. They don't think in academic programs about communicating with alumni. Why do I want to do that? Why do I care about graduates? And
Mhm.
communicating with students. Well, they should know. All the things that I hear people say, and roll
Or
my eyes is probably not appropriate, but you know,
But it's what you do.
I was about
I
to say, sometimes you can't help yourself because it's like you're so many people are trapped in either like that brick and mortar traditional
mm,
understanding of creating a learning program, or they're thinking so out of the box that
yeah, I
that
got
they
two
don't.
words for people that think they want to be in brick and mortar mentality, and that's Ford Etzel. Okay. Um, there is a time and a place for everything, and that time has passed, my friends. And it
Exactly.
doesn't mean you can't do it, but if that's all you're doing, you better be prepared for what that entails. And
Mhm.
if you can't get your folks there when you want them, you're not going to have folks. You really need to get outside of this, look at your populations and decide what's best for them. And I can tell you over the last 2 years, the definition of population and what they're looking for and their expectations is really incredible. I don't know if any of you seen it, but I posted something on LinkedIn about an hour ago about how enrollment is going down in higher education. And I think it's because expectations in students have risen. It's no longer good enough to just say, I went to college. You actually have to
Mhm.
go and get a degree that you can use, or at least hope to use. And it is no more important than in graduate school. If you can't use what you learned tonight, tomorrow, then you're going to look at that and say, why am I wasting my time, my money doing this? And Ashley, from your experience, and Denise, from your experience as a student, I mean, I would think that some things just jump out at you. So, what is your priority, Ashley, when you think about programs and putting them together?
So, the first thing I think about in terms of a program that I'm putting together are what are my short term and long term goals, not only for the content I'm developing for my learner, but also what are the program's long term and short term goals as an organization and an institution,
Hmm.
right? What is our learning philosophy going to be? Are we experiential learners? Are we, like thinking through, do we want to develop immersive type courses, gaming courses? So, those are the things that help me to answer what my goals should be, short term and long term. Um, and that also helps me determine what kind of analysis I want to do of my learners,
Mhm.
right? Like the types of questions that I want to be asking. Um, Understanding what my delivery methods are going to be. Do I want to do in person training or blended learning experiences, asynchronous versus synchronous? Like drilling down into those aspects make your goals not only more actionable and sustainable long term, but helps you to really understand what vision you have for your organization. And really looking at your program as an organization as opposed to just, this is our small program that sits within this organization or group. No, you need to be thinking about your program as if it were its own startup.
Mm,
Yeah. I
that's
mean, I think
powerful.
being an entrepreneur is exactly what instructional designers are anyway. But I mean, Denise, from your perspective, when you look at things that you might want to participate in,
Hmm.
what are the things that stand out to you in terms of, gee, that's something I might want to participate in, or gee, I'm not sure that's really for me?
Hmm. Well, I mean, the first and foremost, I want to be able to apply the things that I'm learning to exactly what I'm doing in my life. If it doesn't have an applicable value to it, it's not going to be something that's going to fall underneath the umbrella of my priorities. So, as a
Mhm.
learner, I really want to make sure that what I'm learning on Tuesday, I can bring to work on Wednesday and actually do it and provide value to the organization. And another thing that is really important to me as a learner, especially when you deal with online learning, is I want a strong community. I want peers that I can engage with, grow with, create a really strong network with. And I've had that experience with the program I'm in right now, and that right there is, I think, one of the biggest pillars of my learning is being able to learn from my fellow peers, because I get to view information from very different lenses. We all come at it from different lenses. We all have different backgrounds and experiences and professional endeavors, and having a learning program that supports that, encourages and nurtures a community centered approach is very powerful to me. That's really what I look for.
Mm.
Yeah. And I think also you have to think about this not just in terms of academic programs or for credit. This includes things like safety training. This includes things like CPR and other things that people have to take. It's the mandated hammer training that, 70% of things for adults are mandated in some way. So you have to imagine that everybody's excited about going. But if you get to meet people with similar views, if you get to share ideas, if you get to feel like you're part of something rather than just sitting there or being in front of your computer and participating, that adds so much to the organization. It's not just about the single incident of a course, it's
Mhm.
about creating a program and an entire ecosystem of people that want to participate, that want to be part of something. And I've seen so many times where programs completely ignore the community aspect of it.
Hmm.
And all they do is offer a course and they go on their merry way. And instead of actually creating something of value that lasts, what they've done is a one off that they can actually, as students, get anywhere. So I think the difference in the well run programs and the difference in the well designed programs is not only instructional design and systems, but it's the systems approach to creating community and what that entails. And I have yet to meet a student that didn't want to be part of a community when they were taking a course.
I think it helps with the engagement factor. I mean, if there was if I entered a classroom either online or in person and I did not feel comfortable or part of a community, maybe as an introverted person, I might be apprehensive to get involved and to share my ideas and to question other people's ideas, to challenge. That's another way that you learn is through challenging ideas in a
Absolutely.
professional way. And so if you don't feel comfortable in that environment, then that's not going to support that kind of a learning endeavor. And so the students could walk away not learning what they potentially could have learned if that environment was enriched with that support.
Hmm.
Well, I think the challenging part, I mean, it's not necessarily program related in the sense that that's how you build program, but I think Denise, that is so important. And that was part of a talk that I gave to National Labs about everybody needs to be challenged to learn. This whole silliness about learning styles and blah, 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 which we all know now is complete garbage. People want to be challenged. People learn when they're challenged. And it's not about challenging them in ways that they can't live up to it or participate, but challenging them in ways that are cognitively resonant with what the content and the population and everything else is. And I don't know, Ashley, it seems to me there's just to be a good program designer and to be a good program director, you really have to expand the horizon of what we've seen in the last 30, 40 years. And as you say, get out of brick and mortar, even if it's only in terms of how you think about things.
Exactly. I wanted to touch on this point because it relates to what you're saying. One of the reasons why I was so captured by instructional design is because I just come out of my political science course or mat or undergraduate degree. And the thing that frustrated me the most is that I didn't have anything applicable to leave that program with, right? Like
Yep.
all
Yep.
you're doing is studying the theory behind people's behavior as it relates to politics. But
Hmm.
we're not actually creating something. And with the instructional design program, I could easily see how my work would apply to the courses. And then the way that you structured our course work was really valuable because it drove, I mean, there was one day where we were studying triangulating data and you had us go around and, some of us were doing, I think, focus groups, others are doing one-on-one interviews, others are doing survey. Like that kind of engagement is invaluable to a learning program. And it's something that is often overlooked or not thought through well enough. And you're going to see that dip in community. You're going to see that drop in how people not only retain the knowledge, but also how they like the courses that they're taking.
Now, Chuck had brought up a good point that this is all a systems approach, really, to be able to design a learning program that is successful and that enriches that engagement and everything that benefits a learner. And so, and you were talking about elements. There are elements that can provide that sort of guidance. And looking at it from if you I'm going to use an analogy of, and I'm going to use an analogy of building and construction because I have that going on in my back deck right now. And so it's on my brain. But I think about no matter what, like if you're building a deck or a house or you're making a puzzle, anything, you have all of these pieces that need to fit together, but they could fit in maybe different ways. That's where creativity comes in play. But at the bottom line is if you don't build that foundation correctly, everything could crumble around it. And so all of these elements are to me, they're pieces of that puzzle, or they're pieces of that foundation that lay on top of each other and create that solid grounding. Because I think that a lot of times, for myself anyway, thinking of creating a course can be overwhelming at first if I don't look at it like a system, and I don't look at it like, okay, I've got these elements that I want to combine to create something. Where do I begin? If I lay everything out and I see everything for what it could be, then that is how I can start to build a foundation. Ashley, what would you say to that? Like, so how do you come up with what elements should be in there? How do you deal with maybe overwhelm at first when you start to think about, I have this whole program I want to create. What do I do? There's so many options.
Yes. And the options will overwhelm you. Oh my gosh, will they overwhelm you? But I think the first place to start, at least for myself, is just assessing the landscape from the standpoint of what's missing, right? So conducting that gap analysis. That would always be my first prime point. After you've established your goals, of course, but even then, those can change depending on the analysis that you do. So I think first you have to be real honest and vulnerable in terms of how you're assessing the reality of your landscape. And if we're sticking with the construction analogy, right, that will help you determine the types of tools and materials you need to provide. So you're updating your deck. I'm terrible at construction, so I'm going to do a bad job with
So am
analogy.
I. So this is awesome.
Right. Yeah, but
And Chuck's just giggling.
if you find out that the soil or the ground is, soft and you need to go back to concrete. Stop. My point is, my point is, once you have accurately assessed the reality of your landscape, how much resources do you have? Are there specific hires you can or cannot make? And that's a big one because I think a lot of times we think, oh, all I need is like 3 graphic designers and, two instructional designers and one voice narrator, and we'll be good. But then there are sometimes politics that come into play with your hiring,
No,
right?
no.
Believe it or not. So understanding the landscape of where you're doing your work, where your program is going to sit, I think is a crucial piece to figuring out how big or small you can make your deck.
Yeah, I mean, that's perfect. And I think one way to look at it to try to visualize this is think about it as circles. And we've all seen these charts where there's a portion of a circle in the middle circle. Let's say the middle circle, the big one, is your project. And then you've got 10, 15, 20 smaller circles like population, politics, budget, staffing, all of these things. And then you start to think about how those circles go into your big circle. And sometimes they change, sometimes they're completely immersed in there, sometimes there's just a piece of it in there. And each one of your projects is going to be different and have different values for this. And I think that's a great way to look at it, actually, is this notion of let's take every single variable that can exist here. And it's what I talk about all the time is worst case scenario analysis. Tell me everything that could possibly go wrong, and then nothing will surprise us. And we may not like it, and we may not have the budget for it, but at least we'll know it's a possibility. And if it comes along, we will find a solution. And where people get in trouble is when they go in and they're naive about the reality of what this stuff is. And it's not just project development, it's course development, it's program development,
Mhm.
whatever you think it is. But the people that get in the biggest trouble are the ones that haven't thought about what can go wrong. What do I need to really be thinking about here? And sometimes that comes with experience. And sometimes it's just a matter of good training, like being a good instructional designer and being in a
Right.
program that teaches you these different elements of a system. So, and it's interesting you build up, bring up the building trades because I have found, and I have had thousands of graduate students. I've also had thousands of students in the building trades. So right now I'm with the Masonry Institute. These are people that work hard every day building the things that we all live in and work in. And what I found is when I teach them instructional design, it clicks with them quicker than it does with a lot of other groups because you use those relationships about would you build a building without a foundation that was sound? Would you design a course without a foundation that is sound? And you start to show the links between just good common sense and what we do as instructional designers. And it's amazing because I see the light go off all the time and I say, why didn't I think of that? I said, well, now you will. It's just a matter of somebody pointing it out to you, but it's all the same. You build stuff, whether it's a building, a skyscraper, a bridge, a car, anything that's built has a roadmap, has a plan, has a design, has specifications. Why would that be any different in what we do as designers?
Hello, right? That is so profound in its simplicity, but it's something that I struggle with quite frequently of having to validate not only the value of the learning program, right, but also the value of applying a systems approach. But you wouldn't ask your neighbor for medical advice if he's not a doctor.
Well, I certainly wouldn't Google it. Let's put
Right,
it
or
that way.
Google it. Yeah, exactly. But 9 times out of 10, that usually ends up being the case
Mm-hmm.
for instructional
Mm-hmm.
design. I do have a story of the worst case scenario that I wanted to share just briefly, because you touched on a really great point, Chuck, which is that if you haven't thought through certain scenarios or what the worst case is, or if you thought of through those things, you won't be surprised, right? So I was standing up a learning organization for a group that remains to be unnamed. Uh, and we had a competitor, and the competitor was actively trying to stand up their own workshops that had similar topics, but not directly related to the curriculum we were building. So instead of competing with them, we wrote in and had them present and join us as a subcontractor for some of the courses we were looking to build. We got, I want to say, about uh, almost to the initiation, or like the initial development phase of some of our courseware with this contractor slash former competitor of ours. And right before everything was about to be signed off, we got a notification that someone who managed our budget did not like the person who was on the board of that organization. And therefore, we would have to now remove them from any type of consideration. And we had to go with another organization instead. And
Yep.
it was just like, how
Hello.
how is this and I mean, like, the reasoning behind them not liking the person on the board was purely personality based and had nothing
Oh,
to
sure.
do with
Yeah.
right. But those are the kinds of things, believe it or not, that you have to think through, like, where am I
Oh,
getting my
yeah.
funding from?
No,
And
I say all the time that I have to show my validity and make my case about my way of doing things and my background, and my credibility is always a question when I work with new groups, especially if there's a board. There's an advisory board or an executive board or a board of trustees or anything that's filled with folks who occasionally have egos and who have to make a statement about how they are going to make sure that we don't waste money, and on and on. We've all heard it. And it just gets to the point where you just start to can the answers to these things. And the more you can put it in their language, like, okay, in your situation, I would be tempted to say something like, well, we're not running for class president here. We're not in high school. This is a professional endeavor with lots of money and lots of things at stake. And we all need to suck it up a little bit and be adult about this. If there's some other issue than just you don't like somebody or there's some history there. But let's let it go and think about the organization and what's best for the organization. And I think all of us as professionals have silenced ourselves, our inner voices that wanted to speak out about something or someone. And as professionals, that's not what we do. Instructional designers don't have opinions. Instructional designers don't have politics. They don't like or dislike people. We are here to facilitate and to provide a product. And that's what we do. And anytime we step out of that box, we're in trouble.
And it sounds like, Ashley, that worst case scenario came out of left field. Like, how do you even plan for something like that? I guess it's part of probably your checklist now when you're thinking about worst case scenarios is, okay, what if there was a personal issue between people? What do we do about that? What's our plan B?
Exactly. I try to do, when I can and where possible, I try to do extensive stakeholder analysis. Like, who are literally all of the people that I need to show this project or this document to in order for me to move this to a development phase? Like, and I'm talking, I need to know if legal needs to be involved, what type of 508 requirements are applicable for this organization, what type of accessibility do I need to be considering. All of those things come into play when I'm thinking about how I'm standing up a program, not just a course, because it's those little aspects that will trip you up in the long run. And there's nothing more valuable than your crystal ball of experience.
Well, I'll say. And the other thing that I always want to find out is who makes decisions. There's a lot of people that think they make decisions or that they're
Absolutely.
intermediaries, but I always find out who makes the final decision on these things. I need to know who that person or persons are or is, and that's where I need to focus my attention if there's an issue. If there isn't, I can play whatever game you want to at whatever level you want to, and that's fine. And most of the times, that's what you expect is people need to show you that they know something, and you need to show them that this is the way we need to do it. And you do the little dance, and all that's fine. But to me, the biggest problems were people making decisions that didn't have the authority and presenting themselves as being able to do that. And when you finally found out who was actually making decisions, you had conversation with them, and then you include them in everything, including emails and invitations to meetings, even if it's just silly around the desk talking about something stuff. If you include them in that and they decide not to attend or too busy or whatever, that's fine. But at least you've got to the point where that avenue of communication is open. And we can go into the politics of groups and personality issues and the rest. Maybe we should do a show on that at some point about all the people we have to work with. Um, and everybody come here and pick on
Stakeholder
me.
analysis would be.
Yeah. I mean, we can do all that, but it's all of that kind of stuff that comes into this system. And if you're not prepared for it, and if you're not willing to tackle those kind of challenges, then you're going to be stuck. And I have seen programs and designers just completely freeze because they cannot get past being able to deal with that kind of pushback and those kind of conversations. So, worst case. And, if you're not doing worst case, please, my friends, do worst case. And if it takes you 5 minutes or a half an hour with a group, please do it. And if
Yeah.
none of this stuff comes to fruition, then that's terrific. But I'm almost going to guarantee you that something on your list will happen. And
Totally.
uh, just do it.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, I I like your point though about freezing up, because I think I think in general, so often as instructional designers, we're being asked to literally solve all of the world's problems.
Well,
And
we can do that though, Ashley, right? I
this
can't
is
think of
true.
anything I can't solve. I'm just give me the authority.
Right, exactly. I remember there was an like this comic strip. I think you had shared it or someone of like if instructional designers ran the world, and it was just hilarious to kind of see like how efficient things could potentially be. But you know, I think that when you're faced with that all challenging obstacle of standing up a program from the ground, well, I would say in my experience, very rarely has it been standing a program up from the ground up. I've had one experience like that. For the most part, it's been coming into a program that exists already but is missing those crucial puzzle pieces like you were saying, Denise. and
Yeah.
and it's when you have that scenario that it can become overwhelming because
Well,
it's like, go ahead.
no, what happens generally in that situation, and I've said many times, drop me into the biggest mess you got, because that's where I'll have the most fun. Because I get to do what I do best, I think, which is analysis and figure out where the problems are and come up with solutions. And I think all designers feel that way. But the one thing that I've found almost all the time when I'm dropped into a disaster is there's this paralysis of decision making. And that's why it hasn't moved from A to B to C, is because somebody's afraid to make a decision. And one of the first things I look for is, okay, what have we got sitting in a pile that nobody wants to move on? Where is it stuck? Because this should have been done months ago, or in some cases, years ago. And you start nosing around and talking to people, and they say, well, I can't get past this decision. And I say, well, who needs to be in a room to make the decision? And you'll get a list. And I said, okay, set the meeting. What are we waiting for? I'd rather be told no now and find out what my limitations are
Right.
than continue this charade of trying to do things with no direction and no authority.
And with that in mind, how much democratizing do you think is valuable in standing up a learning program? Like, how many chefs really need to be in the kitchen?
Well, I think this goes to how you manage things. So, as a project manager, what I would look at is, okay, we need areas of authority and responsibility. So each of the partners in this, whether there's 2 or 200, each of you has an area of responsibility, and you have authority for that area of responsibility. And you will have deadlines, and you will have things that you need to do. And that's where I see the democracy taking place. Ultimately, somebody has to make the final decision. But I have found if I don't give people authority and I don't give them deadlines and I don't give them the tools they need within my ability to do so, then what I have is a bunch of people sitting around swimming, and nobody's going to go anywhere because they don't feel like they have the authority or they don't want to make a bad decision. But if you give them their own territory and their own things that they're responsible for and real deadlines, and also an open door, whether it's online or in the office, that they can come in and talk about things, then that's where I think democracy falls apart. It's not about everybody having an opinion, it's about everybody managing a part of this process, at least in my view.
What I love about what you said just now, and I want everyone who's watching this as a recording to like go back maybe 10 to 15 seconds, because what Chuck said, that in my opinion is another crucial piece that is valuable, is how you're establishing the boundaries and the areas of responsibility and your expectations for their performance within their, like you mentioned, their area of control. I can't remember what the exact phrase was. I was too busy like obsessing over what you said to pay attention to the word. But but essentially that is a crucial piece that I think also when you're building a learning program is understanding how you want to, where the pieces are going to fit within who is
Hmm.
owning what
Hmm.
and what that actually looks like.
And that's got to be challenging. That right
Yeah.
there has got to be incredibly challenging. I mean, wow, because I mean, I just from my sphere of the world is in marketing when I do video production, and I have a team of people who have to who look at it and provide feedback, and ultimately they all have to agree to approve it. And sometimes it becomes too many cooks in the kitchen, all look, because they all have, it's very subjective sometimes when you're dealing with certain aspects of
No.
the music and the visuals and the color schemes and the text,
Yeah.
and all of this stuff becomes very subjective, and you have 10 people having subjective opinions
Hmm.
About the shape of a
about
button.
the shape of a button, exactly. And so how do you control that? Well, what Chuck just alluded to is stay, I don't want to say stay in your lane, but have a responsibility area for each of those people who are making decisions instead of everybody making the same decision.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
and you learn this the hard way. I did not become comfortable with this concept until I had an auditorium full of subject matter experts and instructional designers. So you're within this context of I can't do this myself. I would have as many as 20 or 25 instructional designers and as many as 100 subject matter experts broken up into 7, 8, 9, 10 different groups working on different projects within an overriding organizational umbrella. And the first thing I would do before we ever started and ever brought a subject matter expert in was we sat down as a group and got up on the whiteboard and said, okay, these are your responsibilities. I'm going to have a lead designer in each of these subject matter groups. I'm going to have somebody who's going to be the person that does the running and thinking, and then everybody's going to report back. And I want to know immediately when we have problems. But up to this level, you have the authority to do what you need to do. Take breaks when you want to, all the other things, the little things. But when it comes to the items of discretion where there has to be a decision, you make them within your group, and then you come to me if there's an issue with it. But here are the guidelines that we're going to make those decisions in. So each course is going to be no more than an hour in length. Each one will have objectives. Each one will have evaluations of mastery. They need to be written this way. We're going to have a palette of things you can choose from, but this is the way we're going to format things. And the more you prepare up front as a manager and say, here is the outline of what we're going to do, now go do it. And within your group, you manage it any way you want to. You know what? I never had a single problem. And
It's managing expectations, just like you
yeah,
would in a classroom. You're managing expectations for those involved, because if people don't know what's expected of them, they're going to run around like chickens with their heads cut off, not knowing what the heck they're doing.
Yep. And what what I've seen a lot is novice program learning program directors saying, "Well, you have the opportunity to write your own job description." And you have the opportunity to make this what you want. And you know that's not true.
it's never been true. The only thing that's true about that is the fact that it's not true. I, I mean, come on. So if you're an experienced designer and you're freelancing and you go from job to job to job, you're just sitting there and you roll your eyes, okay, and then you say, okay, tell me what your expectations are. And then there's no answer because they don't have any. And that's the handoff management schema for I really don't have a plan here, but if you do anything wrong, you're gone, right? Isn't that the from my experience, isn't that the
Oh,
level
yeah.
of
No, that is it exactly. Exactly. And that's why, I'm curious what chapter of your book is everything that you just said about how to stand up. Or maybe you should write a management instructional design book next, Chuck. I'll be
um,
first in line.
I think I've written a couple of magazine articles about this. I'll have to go back and look. My brain is a fog. Um, it's not there's so much in there, but there's just enough that I can't index it all the time. But and this gets to a larger topic, which I'm going to talk about, and which I hope this might be the next book. Um, it's forensic instructional design. So this notion of getting in and blowing something up and finding out what went wrong. And this gets us to everything that we have talked about. And when you can forensically look at instructional design, whether it's a program, a course, a population, anything that's a product or a process, you can do forensics on it. And have never seen anybody address it this way. And I think it gets to each of these things that we're talking about, this notion of what is the weakest link? Where did this fall apart? Why didn't this manifest the way everybody thought it would? And I think that the more we mature in this field, and I still have much maturing to do, but the more we mature, the more we realize that we have to be very clear about what we're doing. And you mentioned subjectivity. You can have no subjectivity. None. Zero. There is no subjectivity. There is
Mhm.
creativity and there is collaboration and there's
Right.
opinions. That's all good. But subjectivity, one person making a benign decision is no longer a benign decision. It's a
Right.
milestone that you have to drive around or drive over.
Absolutely.
But how do you get from subjectivity to clear expectation?
Well, I
It's-
think designers are used to this by practice because if you're a designer,
Right.
you can write an objective. There's 4 parts or there's 5 parts, depending on whose model you use.
Mhm.
And there's no subjectivity about a population. There's no subjectivity about behavior. There's no subjectivity about how you're going to determine mastery. And there's no subjectivity about what conditions you provide learners to be able to meet mastery.
Mhm.
And the more your mind thinks within that context, the more you frame all of this in that way, subjectivity disappears. And I have to be honest, the only time I see this is in inexperienced people or people that are posing it. And posing an ISD lasts about 2 seconds when somebody knows what they're doing. And it's sad to watch sometimes, but that's the truth. And I don't know if
Right.
you agree, Ashley, but I think subjectivity is not even part of our vocabulary.
It absolutely, I completely agree with what you're saying. And that I think is the most frustrating part because a lot of people couch their subjectivity or they masquerade as being objective when realistically speaking either they're pulling their perspective from several different opinions or you have so many people having so many different beliefs and ideals about how to communicate a concept that they're not understanding our job as learning professionals is to standardize the training experience so that we ensure that our learners are regardless of where you come from or what your background is, that we have established what the standard is to provide you with a consistent high quality experience,
Exactly.
and that
Exactly.
is lacking in subjectivity.
Mhm.
Well, you just can't have it. And I can put this in 55,000 different contexts. So if someone walks into a store and says they want a new TV, and that's the only information they have, or they go in and say, I want a new car. Like I saw yesterday in a store when I was getting something done, somebody came in and says, I want a new cell phone. So it was a half-hour discussion about, okay, if you look around, you see we got about 300 of them in here. Can we try to narrow that down a little bit? And this is the way some people think. And I think all of us do this sometimes. I mean, it's fine. Not all of us are right on point all the time. Certainly, I'll take the blame for that in different occasions. Things that are less important to me, I'm more subjective in. Things that are important to me, I'm really objective in. And I think that's just
Exactly.
right. It's just professional demeanor. And I think when people are trying to pose as instructional designers and the subjectivity starts to crawl out their sleeves, it's because they just don't know any better. They either don't have the education or the experience. And we try to help them along and do the best we can. But people watching this and people that look at anything in the field, I mean, this is just not an option. We cannot just go on the maybes or the oddas or anything else that I can't nail down and put a number to. And I've always
Exactly.
said instructional design is all numbers. Everything I do as an instructional designer can be put into a numeric format or display or formula or anything else. It's all numbers. And I don't think that's being digital or anything else. I just think it's the reality of what we do. We can quantify anything.
And to that point, you bring up the next aspect of building a learning program that's so crucial, which is establishing what your evaluation plan is going to be. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, they look so I want to say short-sighted in that they're looking at, okay, for this course specifically, for this individual course that I'm building, I want to make sure that the learners like it, but they're not thinking about if someone's actually learning. And there's so much more if you look at your program from a standard of what are the behaviors I want to address with my program, as opposed to, okay, I know I want to build a course on this and I know I want to create a course on that. You're looking too narrowed in. Your scope is needs to be so much wider and larger than that, you know? And that's where you get the quantifiable aspects of it, is when you're fully establishing what your metrics are going to be at the onset of building your program. You're going to stand yourself up for so much more success in the future. But you have to be
Yep.
thinking 5 years into the future, in my opinion, right? So, like, not only just the 30, 60, 90, 180 to like day
Mm-mm.
measurement.
Keep going.
Right, exactly. Like, you have to be looking so far out into what is, like you're saying, what is the mastery behavior that I want to ultimately see? And
Hmm.
how do I scaffold my learners' experience so that they build up to that in a way where they feel respected and valued and they leave the course feeling confident? It's so fascinating that we can like quantify someone's level of confidence or skill in a certain behavior. That is
Yep.
it's so exciting to me, but that's what we can do if we're given the space and the time.
And that's the difference between what we do and what other people do. As professionals, we have to
Right.
quantify things. And two thoughts. One is, I have never knowingly designed a course simply for someone to enjoy it. I will never do that. I have turned down opportunities to do happy courses with organizations that thought this was a gift, and I refuse to do that. It's all about mastery. You tell me what you want them to be able to do at the end of this, and then we got something to work with. And the second thought is, whenever I work with a new client, and almost every time start on a new project, I always ask, when are you going to be happy? What will make you happy? What is the tangible thing that you will look at and say, you know what? I've gotten what I asked for. And if someone who's a decision maker can't answer that question, you're never going to make them happy. You're never going to reach an endpoint that anybody's going to be satisfied with. But once you ask that question, then you can start to have the conversation and all this subjectivity disappears. So, what do you expect out of these learners? When will you be happy with this? When will you say, Chuck, your group did an incredible job with this? And if they can't answer it, you got to work with them. And sometimes I've taken weeks on this question because folks just couldn't really define what they were looking for. And
Mm.
as a designer, if you've ever worked in that environment, you know that they're never happy. They're always asking for changes. They always want to do this. They want to do that. And it's because they don't know what's going to make them happy.
Oh, you're on mute.
And it's been a long day. But the challenge typically is that they have either very few opinions until they see the thing that they don't like,
Oh, yeah, it's a negative base.
right? Or you don't have enough time to get to the actual answer of what will make them happy. You
Yeah.
know, you're brought in to build a course or a program in a quarter, in 3 months,
Hmm.
but you don't find out until a month and a half in that what they actually wanted was X, but the whole time they were telling you it was Y.
And
It
that's why I always ask them. That's the first question because I
Right.
don't want to wait 6 weeks or 8 weeks.
Mhm.
And that's why all of my contracts say you get one revision. Okay, if you want to play hopscotch with where you're going with this, that's fine, but this is what's going to cost you.
Mm.
And if it's an internal client, then you have a different kind of discussion about value, but you get so many hours and so many dollars. And I swear to goodness, I will not start a project until they've answered that question.
Ooh, that's right there. It's like a big light bulb moment
I think
Uh,
for me.
I'm definitely going to snatch that
I've got
because
it on sale this week. Both of you can have it.
Yes. See,
You know what I
Ashley?
think is a discount rate? Yeah, well, some kind of a coffee beverage, I
Mm,
think.
mm.
I mean, I think I can arrange that. Ashley, you?
Okay, yeah. I think
Right,
in December we're
exactly.
going to do that. Yeah. So you can both buy me a coffee because it's going to save you thousands of hours in your career. But
No, seriously, because I think so often what people presume is an instructional design trait is being reactionary and being like we always say, we're not mind readers, right? But we can update something if it looks good. But the amount of time that you waste as a designer
uh,
having to, like you're saying, revise courses or resources when everything was already agreed upon,
hmm
I I
yeah,
really like that strategy because
yeah.
I
You have to. You have to do it that way.
and
Otherwise,
ultimately,
you're
go ahead.
just the puppet on the end of the strings.
Yes.
And if you got nothing else to do, that's fine if that's what you want to do. But most designers are pretty darn busy. Projects backed up to backed up to backed up,
Yeah.
and you're going to allocate X number of weeks or X number of months to something, and then you want to move on because no designer likes to have something hanging over their head. That makes us all nuts. But
Yes.
if you are very clear about, okay, this is what we're going to do, and this is your expectations, and this is how long it's going to take, and if you go messing with it, that's fine. But here's what happens when you do that. And
I
I've seen so many designers that didn't put those kind of clauses in contracts, and there's
mm,
7 revisions, 8 revisions. They shoot a video, they don't like the location. Oh, I got to reshoot that, and a voiceover. Well, I don't like that person's voice.
it's insane. And like literally our time is, you're talking about quantifiable. We put an actual dollar amount on an hour of our time for
On a
some,
minute.
right.
I
I
mean,
feel
I
like
have an
we
attorney's approach to this.
right.
If you call me how many times, X number of times, and we're on the phone for 43 minutes, that's exactly this many dollars. I
I
mean, you almost have to get to that point sometimes with people. I hate to do it, but they're just messing. Yeah, I
yeah,
can mess too.
but but that's the thing. I mean, we're not magic lamp genies. No,
We're not?
no,
Oh,
believe it. You might
Ashley.
be.
I need to go sit in a corner and contemplate now. I thought
Right.
I was.
We'll paint you blue next year for Halloween, and we'll
Promise?
make sure.
Well, thank you for setting that expectation, Ashley.
Yeah.
Right.
So, a certain person in the upper left part of the screen will do exactly that. Right? Right, Denise?
You better
Uh-huh.
believe it.
Yeah.
Right. Or just give him like a genie lamp filter or something, because it's like the
Oh, great, Ashley. Just give her more ideas.
the expectation.
You're gonna watch the replay on this, and I'm gonna make Chuck all blue and everything.
There'll probably be
Perfect.
lightning bolts coming out of my ears or something. I'm not even going to watch this in post. But so I think we're about out of time, aren't we, Miss
Yeah,
Producer?
we're heading
Yeah,
near
we're
up the
right
hour
there.
now, and God, this
So
has been
I
a
will
great
say, God,
conversation.
wasn't it a great evening, Ashley? It's always a hoot having you here. You're so smart and you bring so much energy to this. And Denise, by gosh, I just love your perspective on stuff. And I would say to all of you that are watching this, please join us. Please be part of this family. Be part of what we're trying to do here. It's not about money. It's not about anything else. Nobody's got any ego involved in this. We're just trying to build the field of instructional design. And this is a conversation with you. And if it helps, that's terrific. If there's things you want to talk about, let us know. We're now up, gosh, how many, Denise? We're over 60 something.
We are, and we're almost to 200
Almost
subscribers at
200
this point.
subscribers.
So we're three
And
shy. So come on, people, three more.
yeah, three more because Denise said she's going to buy me a new Buick if we got to 200.
Yes.
So I'm
I've got
looking forward
all
to that.
picked out for you,
So
Chuck.
let's, yeah, I can only imagine. So yeah, just have the tow truck drop it out front. So that's where we are with this. And remember, we're live first and third Tuesdays. We also have other things that we've got in production that'll show up every once in a while. But talk to us, join us, be part of this family. We really appreciate your participation.
Bye.
Bye.